Hello friends, today we're talking about time. Time in a de-escalation context can feel counterintuitive, especially if you're under the impression that de-escalation is for emergency situations. Since that isn't always the case, we must address the ways in which time is actively useful for de-escalation. First of all, de-escalation takes time. This sounds obvious, but it can take some practice to really internalize the fact that de-escalation techniques are not a checklist, and when you've done enough of them, then suddenly the situation is de-escalated. Sometimes de-escalation happens in 2 or more separate chunks. Sometimes the only reasonable move is not to play and completely disengage from a situation. Sometimes the person who needs help managing their behavior is on the phone with you, so you only have a quarter of your normal toolkit, and so you tell them to please call back when they feel ready to have this conversation, and then you hang up on them. Further, even in a de-escalation situation where you have all of the tools, resources, and backup you could possibly wish for, it takes time to guide someone through the process, and everyone moves at their own pace. I've been part of conversations that took multiple hours, and I've been part of conversations that took seconds. It depends on the very specific situation at hand and the needs of the agitated person. Sometimes you spend an hour building rapport, and when you've got a good relationship, that's enough to get the two of you on the same page. Sometimes you start with great rapport, but they're under the influence of a substance or they're having a manic episode, and you can only get to a resolution by sticking with them until they come down, especially if it's not safe to leave them alone. Point is, each situation should be treated as though it were unique, because it is. And if you approach it like it's a flowchart where if X, then Y, then you won't be successful because you will miss a lot of the details that you'll need for good de-escalation. Besides, it's hard to be an active listener when you're a robot waiting for the right input. Second, taking breaks in de-escalation attempts can actually be extremely positive. Have you ever been in an argument with someone and it just goes on forever, and by the end of it, you don't even care what happens as long as you don't have to be in this conversation anymore? This happens a lot in couples where one of them internalized the advice never go to bed angry, and it is also common for people who have a terrier-like obsession with solving the problem. If you have successfully worn someone down until they are now behaving how you want them to, that's not de-escalation. That's you being an abusive asshat, and that's not a good look. As soon as it becomes clear that you're going in circles, that's a great time to take a break. As soon as the calm person in the situation is no longer calm, that's a necessary time to take a break. Taking time away from the conversation can help people think about what's happened and work on a resolution. Both parties come to a new conversation with a different starting point and different expectations, and de-escalation can be much more productive that way. Plus, if you were the problem, then the best thing you can do for the de-escalation effort is to leave. The separation can even de-escalate the situation all on its own. Given time to reflect, people who were safe and sane to begin with can resolve their own behavioral needs, and sometimes people don't process well while engaged in a conversation. When you leave, then they can think about what's happened and perhaps resolve the issue themselves. Third, if you're getting emotionally involved in the situation, then you will not be a good de-escalator. If you have a team in place, then you need to tap out. But if you don't, which is more common, then you may need space and time to recover your composure. A situation can only de-escalate down to the level of the calmest person. So if the de-escalator is angry, frustrated, tired, or otherwise escalated, then that's as calm as the situation will ever get. The whole reason that escalation can be a problem, which isn't all the time, and when escalation is and is not a problem is a topic for another time, is that it limits your ability to engage with and react appropriately to your surroundings. So when you're escalated as well, you aren't able to engage appropriately with another escalated person. If you're in a situation where the escalated person is in a mental health crisis, or if they have suicidal or homicidal ideation, then this can be a very dangerous situation in the best of circumstances, and not being calm and fully engaged can result in harm to them, to you, or to your team. So being able to tap out, take a break, or take time to reset yourself is extremely important, since no de-escalation goes as planned. Fourth, taking it slow lets you be gentle, which helps you preserve your rapport in the long run. There's lots and lots of situations where it's appropriate to sit in silence with someone, or to offer some activity that gives you time to talk, but also occupies the hands. You want to know why jigsaw puzzles are so common in psychiatric facilities? It's not just because you can't cut someone with a puzzle piece. You ever been on a road trip with someone and you end up just having the kinds of personal conversations that you wouldn't dream of having in other situations? It's part of the magic of the road trip, and it's because you don't have to look at each other. When you aren't forcing a script where you have to make eye contact, then it removes a lot of pressure and it helps make people more comfortable saying things that are hard. Puzzles, board games, TV shows, whatever you have available to you that lets you put a new script in play and relieve some of the pressure of having to talk it out. Finally, the most important thing about time. It takes time to be good at de-escalation. You could take everything I can possibly teach you, everything you can find about the subject, everything about communication in general, and you would still need hours and hours and hours of practice in order to be competent, much less genuinely good at de-escalation. And sometimes, no matter how good you are, you won't succeed. That situation is how we get better at de-escalation. You've probably heard the term debrief before, and you probably have a general idea of what a debrief is. The common context that we encounter is that a soldier or a spy is questioned about a mission once they return from it, and that's close to what we're talking about, but it's not quite there. A debrief in an emergency management context is a conversation about what happened, with all members of the response team present, with the goal of identifying flaws in the response that can be improved. It happens after drills and trainings as well as after live emergencies, and that is the definition that we are going with today. The way that you become a better de-escalator is not through study. Study helps, but you have to experience an escalated situation. You have to live through managing your own emotions while trying to have a productive conversation and not sacrificing your rapport and keeping the escalated person from perceiving that you are impatient or frustrated, active listening, proposing a plan that does not ask the escalated person to sacrifice their autonomy or their dignity, set boundaries on unacceptable behavior, introduce consequences without being threatening, and follow through on the consequences without coming across as arbitrary or mean. It's a lot. And if you go in and you do your best and you accept the fallout without question, then you're never going to get better, and that's where the debrief comes in. During the debrief, you take the time to really look at the situation, what led up to it, and how it happened. Were there signs of escalation that were missed? Could we have responded earlier? Did we use the tools that were available to us properly? Were there any responses on the part of the team that was exceptionally helpful, or anything that set us back? I like to do a good, bad, and ugly when running a debrief, and this is the same way that I debrief my gaming tables too. It's good for lots of stuff. I ask 3 big questions, and then I follow up on things that come up during that discussion, along with my own notes. First, what went well? This is a question that doesn't get asked enough, in my opinion, but we do need to take the time to acknowledge people who did a great job. This reinforces using those helpful techniques and gets the rest of the team thinking about how they can contribute in order to receive that sweet, sweet hit of dopamine. This can be very difficult to do in a solo intervention, but do try to review your response and identify things that you're proud of and things that you may want to put in your toolbox for future situations. 2. What could we have done better? This is geared towards refinement. Were there any responses that were fine? Not great, maybe they didn't have quite the effect you wanted, but ultimately weren't harmful. Small critiques like posture and letting listening poses slip would go here as well. This is the pivot question, and it needs to be there. I've seen people try to bundle it in with the ugly, but that's missing the point of this question. This question helps put people in a critical mindset, where they can depersonalize their actions and simply look at the outcome to determine whether an action was good or bad. If you skip that step, it becomes very easy for people to internalize criticism of their actions as criticisms of their character, and that's counterproductive. 3. Was there anything that was actively dangerous or harmful that happened, and how could we avoid that in future de-escalation situations? This is where you look at anything that didn't help or that actively hurt the de-escalation attempt and figure out how that happened and how to avoid it in the future. Pretty straightforward. A good debrief doesn't have to take a long time, but you must take some time to do it in order to improve. Otherwise, it'll be hundreds or thousands of de-escalation conversations before you can really figure out what you could be doing better. And if your need for de-escalation isn't great because you never have disagreements with anyone in your life, then it might not be as important for you. But if you have a spouse or children or coworkers or customers or clients or friends, then taking the time to be good at de-escalation may be worth it. What do you think is the value of time in a de-escalation context? Have you ever been able to use breaks in de-escalation successfully? Put your stories, additions, or corrections in the comments, and I will talk about some of them next time. On the subject of apologies, McGorky pointed out that there's a lot of overlapping rules for apologies and having an argument fairly. And yeah, that's a great observation. Something that you'll find as you dig more into de-escalation is that calling it its own field is a bit of a reach. And really what de-escalators are doing is trying to pool resources from emergency management and therapeutic contexts and then apply those more generally to escalated situations. Link to the article below. It is a really good foundation for how to approach any disagreement, including escalated situations. On options and orders, Sukumaija, and let me know if I'm butchering your name, by the way. Sukumaija asks how to handle a situation where the escalated person is someone who has power over you. Whatever the power dynamic, the rules are pretty similar, but when you're in a lower power position, the stakes are higher, and it's much more important to keep a tight rein on your ego. First, identify their goal. Are they trying to feel powerful and exert control over the situation? Are they a bully and they just want to see you fearful? Are they simply trying to gain compliance in a way that isn't working great for you due to their leadership style? You can get more information about their goal by validating an emotion, whichever one you see. I see that you're frustrated, but I want to make sure that we're on the same page here. Followed by some questions of content, where the answer is a fact that they have, like, just how far behind our benchmarks are we? Once you've got that, decide how much authority you want to give them. This is entirely up to you and highly context specific. Sometimes you want to give, say, your boss a lot of authority because we live in a late capitalist hellscape where you have to have a job or you'll die and you don't have another job lined up yet. Or you're going to ask for a raise at your evaluation in a month and you want to make sure that your relationship with your boss is in good shape. Same goes for landlords and parents. Take a look at what you want your relationship to be like after this conversation and grant them just enough authority to keep it pointed in that direction. Agreeing with their driving emotion and acknowledging the circumstances as having caused the altercation rather than putting blame on their choices or character, even if their choices and character are 100% how we got here. This puts you on the same team as them and positions you as an assistant. From here, we can focus on resolving the problem that caused their escalation together, as teammates. Caveat: if giving the escalated person authority would put you in an unsafe position, then make sure that you have a backup plan. It is okay to make nice with an abusive boss as long as you're looking for another job on the side or putting together a report for HR or for their boss or whatever your plan is. It's totally fine to concede completely to a threatening spouse to secure your short-term safety if it increases your chances of gaining long-term safety. Where you draw that line is up to you and your circumstances, and I trust your judgment. I hope this was helpful. Next week, we'll be talking about the presenting problem. Be smart, stay safe. Bye.